All right, guys, as you're watching the game tonight, it's very important to understand that there's a little girl fighting for her life. Okay? She's in the fight of her life. We're going to hear all night about how this game is a back and forth battle. It's a war between two teams. A struggle between offense and defense. All those hyperbolic statements. All those metaphors to war and struggle, when there's actually a little girl, little Ariel. She's fighting for her life because she was in a car that had run out of gas on the side of the road, and a guy with multiple DUIs in his past, who's been arrested for gun crimes, a thug who's coaching in the NFL, Britt Reid, admittedly had some drinks and some Adderall and got behind the wheel. Now, there's another kid who's doing a lot better, but they're still going to have a long road of recovery. But we wish that kid, we keep that kid in our prayers. But little Ariel, she's fighting for her life while we're watching this game, while we're watching the Super Bowl, while we're enjoying company of friends, while we're rooting and while we're oohing and ahhing with each play, while we're sitting at home the same way Britt Reid is watching the game. He's at home watching the game from the comfort of his couch, the same way we will be. This little girl is fighting for her life, and we must keep her in our consciousness, in our prayers. Now, she wasn't killed by a cop, and she wasn't injured by a cop like Jacob Blake. So her GoFundMe, I think they got like 50,000 in it, but I encourage you guys to support this girl's GoFundMe because she is going to need a lot of help going in the future. Even if she wins this battle, the struggle of her short life, she will be that kid where you see her and you're like, oh man. She'll be that kid when you're walking through the mall and you see some kid walking with braces or in a wheelchair, or staring off into space. She'll be that kid if she wins this battle that she's been thrust into because of the thuggery and the foolishness and the insensitivity of one Britt Reid, who's an employee of the NFL. Now, this is the second time in 2 weeks where a white employee of the NFL has caused grave and serious bodily harm to a black female, and the media has completely ignored it. Not social media, because you guys were all over the Chad Wheeler story. Salute to all the YouTubers and all the influencers on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. You guys were all over this story, even though the mainstream media hid it from us, tried to hide it from us, tried to bury it. Now, there's a reason they tried to bury this story, and there's a reason they're burying the Britt Reid story. The left loves to push this narrative that the black community was a utopia before Donald Trump got elected, and now magically it's a utopia again. Race relations were great before Donald Trump got elected, and now they're great again. So we all see through that. Hit one if you see through that. If you're seeing through that. The problem with that game that the leftist media, MSNBC and CNN and ESPN are playing, is that people who voted for them, people who got them elected, i.e. black women are now going to suffer, because you can't have this narrative that race relations are bad, still bad under Biden, because Biden fixed everything, right? You voted for Biden, now everything's magically better. Got Trump out of there, and look at the big difference in your life since Trump got out of there. So that's the game they're playing. And one thing they play is the black woman. So during the Trump administration, 2017, what was born? The Me Too movement, a black woman-led organization, a black woman-founded movement. Me Too was founded by a black woman to highlight the sexual abuse, rightfully so, that black men do to black women. Although it's not all of us, and nobody's saying it's all, so don't, if you're not a hit, if you ain't doing it, don't holler in my comment section. Don't get in my comment section hollering if you ain't a hit dog. However, white women hijacked that movement. White women just took it. They just straight jacked it like a full-time jack move. You know how, like, you ever jacked somebody for something? You ever took somebody's lunch money? You ever robbed somebody? White women just came in and jacked that movement. So we're forgetting that that movement under a Republican president was started to, the Democrats and the liberals started that movement initially to show how bad black women had it under a Republican president. However, white women jacked it, whatever. You're not going to hear anything about Me Too under Biden, even though he was charged with the same thing that Donald Trump was charged with. The same thing, the same charges, the same allegations that Trump had against him, Biden had those same allegations against him. But you're not going to hear anything about the Me Too movement. Bill Cosby and R. Kelly been doing their shenanigans for decades. Bill Cosby got people in the 70s saying he did stuff to them. R. Kelly got women in the 90s saying, back in the 90s saying they did stuff to him. And I believe it. You ain't got all these people saying these accusations and it ain't no fire there. All that smoke and it ain't no fire, I don't believe it. However, they weren't brought out into the public square and spanked until there was a Republican president to show how bad things are. Things are terrible. Look, we'll even take Bill Cosby and R. Kelly into the town square and flog them in front of everybody. A public humiliation of these two black men who were great until a Republican got in office. So black women, even though they are responsible for the Democratic Party being in office now, their concerns and their plight, which is inflicted by certain black men, a certain population of the black community, and as we're seeing, white men as well, will go unaddressed because it doesn't fit the narrative. Everything's fine now. Biden's in office. Everything's fine. The Harlem attackers who attacked that woman in the Harlem liquor store, that story would have been huge. That story would have been huge under a Republican president. Mainstream media didn't cover it at all. Not a blurb from the mainstream media. Even though the black community had dozens of rallies all throughout New York, hundreds and hundreds of people in the street protesting, the mainstream media did not cover that at all. Because it doesn't fit a narrative. Everything's fine now. Now back to this little girl, Ariel. A little black female who was gravely injured by a white man. The perfect race-baiting story for the race-baiting media that loves to make everything about race. Everything's about race. Tom Brady's racist because we found a 5-year-old picture of him with a MAGA hat in his locker. Tom Brady got dragged all week because he's associated with Trump. He's friends with Trump. So him having a MAGA hat in his locker 5 years ago was a big story all week. It didn't get any traction, but the mainstream media tried to beat us over the head with it. But this story, they're burying it. So a white Trump supporter having a MAGA hat in his locker, 24-hour coverage around the clock. Of course, we know Andy Reid is a liberal. His thug sons, like most thugs are liberal because they want, if you're a thug, you want liberal policies. You want the jails open. You want, welfare, government assistance. You want you want no bail. You want, you want all these things that are good for criminals. Okay? So most thugs are liberal. You ain't gonna find no conservative thug. Okay? So Andy Reid's son, a thug, just like his other son, Garrett, who passed away, is a thug. Gravely, and this girl still may pass away. And nothing from the mainstream media. Nothing. So as you're watching the game tonight, two things. Watch out for the game the media's playing, that everything's magically all right now that Trump's out of office. You know how many brothers have been killed by cops in the last 2 weeks? I can tell you, a lot. Have you heard about any of them on the news? No. Also, keep this girl in mind. She needs your prayers. She needs your donations to her GoFundMe, because if she does make it, she has a long road to recovery just to make it to a point where she can have a semi-functional or somewhat some semblance of the life she would have led before she collided with Britt Reid, the thug son of Andy Reid. So, as you're watching the game, don't forget about this little girl. Even though the left liberal mainstream media wants you to forget about her because everything's magically all right because Biden's in office.